The Department of Education is the fifth biggest bank in the entire country. It's also the biggest debt collector. And some news just came out that you need to know about. The Department of Education recently announced that it's going to be transferring its $1.7 trillion student loan portfolio to the Treasury. Yes, all of it. Obviously, this raises major concerns. We're talking massive privacy risks, potential legal violations, and the introduction of junk fees that have never even existed before. If you didn't know, junk fees are those pesky, unnecessary hidden charges that are often added to the price of goods and services. And in a letter, Secretary of Education Linda McMahon alluded to charging borrowers junk fees just to collect on student loan debt. The debt collective were deeply alarmed by this because debtors already have to worry about the cost of living. Now they have to worry about potentially illegal hidden charges. Like, no, especially on debt that shouldn't exist and doesn't have to exist and is unjust. So what can you do about it? Number one, join us in demanding a 1-year pause on all federal student loan payments and collections. The Trump administration actually was first to pause student loan payments during the pandemic. It can happen again. Go here, spread this far and wide. Number two, we need every student debtor to call their member of Congress and demand a full record of their student loan payment history. Okay, so that means how many payments have you made, how much is still owed, etc. Look, big banks and creditors have been cashing in on the student loan crisis for far too long. It's time that we fight back. The Department of Education.
In terms of funding, ICE is now bigger than the United States Marines. And my Republican friends are saying to me, saying to my colleagues, that if you don't give this overgrown paramilitary force of masked agents jumping out of unmarked cars more money, we're going to leave TSA workers and others unpaid. I think that's patently unfair. I think we ought to fund the federal workers. We ought to fund FEMA, Coast Guard, we ought to fund Homeland Security while we have a principled argument about what is happening with ICE. Because what is happening there gets to the very basic things that I learned in my 9th grade civics class about the engagement between law enforcement and ordinary citizens every single day. And what we're witnessing in this moment is unacceptable. Pay the TSA workers. In terms of funding, ICE is now bigger than
Pay the TSA workers. Good morning, welcome, and come on in, chat. We're about to get it started. Welcome to Black Press USA's morning show, where we bring you the headlines and culture. And back this week is Dr. Michael Davis, former California State Assembly member, former Los Angeles commissioner, and he's here to talk all things headlines and culture with us this morning. Welcome back, Mike.
Well, thank you so much, Mia, for being here. Good morning.
Good morning. Let's get to it. We just saw Senator Raphael Warnock talking about what's happening with TSA and, Homeland Security. And, as we were talking yesterday, prepping for the show, you are discovering just how bad the airports are getting because TSA workers are not funded. So now that you've had some time to marinate on that conversation, what are your thoughts about our government not funding TSA workers, but sending ICE agents into our U.S. airport?
Well, obviously, the very first thing that is inescapable is that we have a responsibility and we have to be accountable for our first challenge, which is to run the airports effectively and efficiently. We shouldn't have to compare the failure to do that with something else. The airports are so critically important to our everyday lives in America. Mm-hmm. And we depend upon those who have the responsibility, the federal government, to once again do an effective and an efficient job. It's inescapable that this is what we're going to hold you accountable to. Do your job.
Do your job. And when we talk about Homeland Security, We know that TSA as well as ICE falls under its umbrella. And so instead of them sending ICE agents to the airports, why don't they reallocate some of those funds to TSA, just like they're doing with the Department of Education? So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But the way they're rerouting funding and departments of the Department of Education and dismantling it, it seems like there should be no reason why they can't do the same thing under Homeland Security. Or how about pull that money from the from Pete Hegseth's budget over at the Pentagon and the Department of Defense, now the Department of War. I mean, if he can spend $2 million and $9 million on crab legs, most certainly they can reallocate some of those millions over to Homeland Security for TSA. So there are multiple ways that they can fund TSA with not even dealing with Congress. But we know that we're dealing with a Trump clan administration who does not care for anybody except the 1%. But we'll talk about the Department of Education a little bit later. We know that the SAVE Act is what Donald Trump wants passed, and he's telling Congress not to do anything until Democrats pass it. There's some voter suppression within this bill. So, chat, we have our morning poll. And so, with the SAVE Act hitting the Senate floor this week, and that was part of the reason why we showed you Senator Raphael Warnock. How concerned, chat, are you about new documentation requirements like passports and birth certificates affecting your ability to vote? How do you feel about that, especially women who have been divorced or they've gotten remarried? This can pose a problem for them, which was an issue back for them, for us back in the 60s and 70s, right? And so we got past that, but now it's back again. So, chat, how do you feel about documentation requirements like passports and birth certificates affecting your ability to vote? Are you A, very concerned, B, somewhat concerned, C, not concerned at all, or D, you need more info on what the bill actually does? So drop your letters in the chat of how you feel about this SAVE Act and it possibly impacting your ability to vote because of certain passport and birth certificate required. So drop your answers in the chat. Mike, how do you feel about it?
Well, obviously, again, it really gets down to the very basics. We have to go back to the basics. The federal government's responsible for running these programs, these facilities, and we expect in every circumstance that they will do it efficiently and effectively. Now, we have had voter systems before, and we have had problems with voting before. I think any kind of operation from a public administration perspective that makes it more complex, that makes it much more questionable, has to stop. It is time to demonstrate that you can run your level of government. Every level of government has something that the public has assigned to them. The cities do public works and the counties do public works. The federal government, among its many other duties and assignments, have to run our transportation airport systems and also our government in terms of the voting systems. And this is what we expect for them. And time again, we hear every week some complaint about some issue that demonstrates an inability to run a government system effectively and efficiently. And it's really getting to the point where it is going to be questionable about the capability to run the systems for which government is assigned. And so that is not a pretty sight.
All right, so let's jump into the chat. We say Jay main event, that's gonna get him in trouble, saying don't agree or anything less. Okay. Dr. Marilyn said, I'm concerned, not for me, but for those who cannot afford or find their documents. Mike V is saying A, which he's very concerned. Jay main event says C, not concerned at all. And Michelle Madison says she's B, somewhat concerned. I'm concerned about all of it. Anything that this Trump administration is doing, I'm concerned about it because it is not in the best interest of just regular working people. And especially anything that they do is not in the best interest of people of color. We know this. We've seen them. When people, what do they say? When people show you who they are, believe them. So you can believe anything that this Trump administration is doing at this point with this SAVE Act. It has to do with the midterms. Mike, yesterday I just saw Steve Bannon talking about this TSA test or this airport test with ICE is for the midterms. So they're seeing how the interactions and how they control mass groups of people, you know, with lines and assemblies and waiting for voting. They're saying this is a test. This is coming from Steve Bannon. He's on a podcast talking about this. So none of this is in the best interest of the American people. Good morning, Orangey. Orangey is checking in. So let's jump into, as we talk about voting, let's head to California, where there is a lot of chatter, y'all, because of a debate that's happening today at USC. Now, 4 major Democratic candidates of color. We're talking about Tony Thurmond, who is an African American, Xavier Becerra, who was the former Health and Human Services Secretary of the United States, okay, former LA Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa, and Betty Yee have all been excluded from this debate at USC. Now, the candidates are calling on their rivals to skip the debate in protest, arguing that the selection criteria effectively shuts out all major candidates of color in one of the nation's most diverse states. Now, USC and partners state that the criteria were independent and data-driven, created by Professor Christian Gross to keep the crowded field manageable. Now, the NAACP is speaking out against this, and they've sent a letter to USC. So has Xavier Becerra. This is a hot mess, Mike. What's your takeaway from this?
I'm just absolutely disappointed in USC as a graduate, as a double graduate, quite frankly, that they would get themselves caught up in what appears to me to be very opposed to the very mission in which the university was created. It is not the job of USC to limit anything for the public. My understanding is the attempt to have this debate was to educate the public on all of those who are going to run and to give the public an opportunity to hear their responses to policy issues presented, hopefully by the policy school at USC. I'm alarmed that we've not heard from the president. Where is he? What does he have to say?
Are you talking about the president of USC?
Of the University of Southern California, located in Los Angeles. Where is the president? What is his response to this? I haven't seen him, haven't heard from him. And leadership, where is it?
So let's jump into the chat. They are definitely chiming in. Dr. Marilyn is saying one reason why they want it to pass, talking about the SAVE Act, is to discourage women voters because they typically lean towards Democrat. Okay, Tyler Wolf says, who doesn't have an ID? You'd be surprised. And the issue of the ID is, if let's just say a woman has been remarried, but her ID has her former partner's name, then she'll be affected by that. So it's not even about the ID. And with the price of gas and everything going up, you know, maybe they can't afford an ID. So it does cause a problem. So it's not just about the ID. It is about the criteria that they are putting on you having an ID. That is an issue.
Tests and IDs are historically associated with complex accusations of racism on various systems we've had in the past. When we look at past voter problems and complexities, there were tests involved. You had a literacy test. You had the criteria for property. Also, let me just dovetail to, I just got a note that USC has canceled the debate.
What?
So I think that this is great because I was very disappointed. And it
Hot
was an
topic in LA.
understatement. It was an understatement to use the word disappointment.
All
The,
right, we got breaking
but
news.
the truth is inevitable.
Okay,
The
well,
truth,
we're going to get back to USC. I do want to
yeah,
get that,
yeah,
but I want to, because you were bringing up a very good point about how it disenfranchises and suppresses voters. And Mike
yes,
V is saying only a matter of time before they start putting jelly beans in a jar in November.
yes, absolutely. I could not have said it better uh,
Hmm.
than that citizen just did. So, yeah, I think that these systems that we are seeing clearly lead to an inability to run systems. And this is what we expect our public administrators, those who are elected by the public, to be able to do. Time and time again, we are demonstrating our inability to run government systems, and that's not good.
And so, we wanted to make sure we get the chat in. Orange G says, I have told y'all the Democrats have race identity problems. Dr. Mellon says, no, they are requiring a passport or birth certificate to vote to prove U.S. citizenship. This is in addition to your state ID. Great point, Dr. Maryland. And so, a lot of people don't have a passport. You would be surprised how many people don't have passports and, birth certificates. And so, with a birth certificate here in California, you have to show proof, you have to show your social security number. So if you don't have your social security number, then you got to request that. So it is hurdles that they are trying to put you through to vote, which is a basic right. And we know that voter suppression and voter fraud is a fraud coming out of this Trump administration. But let's jump back into USC. So once again, people power works. Like I said before, you had letters coming from the NAACP from the state of California. You had candidates writing in and pressuring the other candidates to stand and protest. And then what do you have here? USC cancels the debate. It was one of the biggest debates talked about over the past 7 days.
Yeah.
Just because it was at USC and because of the criteria that this professor determined who should and should not be on the platform.
Yes.
And so shout out to people power. But
Yeah.
I want to jump into the race to succeed Governor Gavin Newsom. It's still heating up, y'all. And many Democrats are looking to replace, Newsom. But recent polling suggests 2 Republicans and 0 Democrats might advance from the top 2 primary to the general election. So basically, for our primary, the top 2 vote getters succeed to November, and that could be 2 Democrats, that could be 2 Republicans. And what they're saying is because the Democratic field is so wide and there's so many Democratic candidates in, they can all cancel each other out. Mike, what do you say to that? If people, let me just say this: the Democratic Party here, the state party, is saying that some of these Democrats need to get out of the race. That's what they're saying. And so, from that perspective, what do you say, Mike?
Well, let me just add to my response first, my emotions about what has just occurred. It's inevitable that USC confront the truth, and I'm glad that they did. And let me add a little bit of sauce to that answer, which is it's not USC's role to discriminate or to tell us anything about what we should do as voters. It's not their role to care about whether or not Democrats or Republicans have enough of chutzpah, if you will, to win or to lose. That's not USC's role. Their role is to educate the public. Now, as far as Democrats is concerned, if in fact we have candidates who cannot muster what it takes to win and be victorious, whose fault is that? There is a date that has already been set for all of us. It's been set for Republicans, it's been set for Democrats, and we all agreed before any one of these candidates filed to run for office. And that agreement is that June 2nd is the date that there will be an election by the people, not just simply the Republicans, not just simply the Democrats, not just simply the others, the independents, the peace and freedom and others. June 2nd is the rule. It's the agreement, and we ought to stick to it. That's my answer.
Okay, but if okay, so we have two MAGA Republican candidates that are running for governor in the state of California. And you have how many candidates that are Democrats?
At least approximately 8.
Okay, so you have about 8 candidates. And none of them are polling high enough to be the MAGA person. That's what the polls are saying, right? That everybody is like in the same. And so, do Democrats want to risk losing the state of California because everybody wants to run? It just seems like there should be, and I actually kind of blame the party because a month ago or a month and a half ago, when they had the state convention up in Northern California, the Democratic Party couldn't come up with one candidate to endorse. And so now you have all of these candidates that are running, and the state Democratic Party has not endorsed one candidate, which I find is problematic because Tom Steyer, who is not a Democrat, so to say, but he has tons of money. He's running commercials constantly here in the state of California. And so people are looking to vote for him. And we know that his best interests are for Californians. We know this. And so I just don't understand, number one, why the party couldn't come up with one candidate to endorse so that the people of California, the Democrats of California, would have some type of focal point to focus on somebody. But because they didn't endorse anybody, it's a wild, wild west for who's going to be the Democrat. And we might not get one. We might get 2 MAGAs running for the seat.
I want to say, am I in Russia? On one hand, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You ask people to be involved in the process. You say that they should get involved to the degree of taking up their interests and running for office. And the minute they do, we come back with they shouldn't do it. So, ladies and gentlemen, is this what we call a democracy? Is this the same group I just heard screaming about a democracy? Really?
But so, where is the leadership in the Democratic Party?
Well, my point is this. The leadership is the rules that we agree on before these personalities are assessed after we've agreed on the rules. I just brought up the rule on the first question. June 2nd is what we agreed to. Now you question the Democratic Party and our democracy there. Before any of these candidates filed as Democrats, we decided that if you get the endorsement of the Democratic Party, you have to have 60% of the vote. Mm-hmm. We didn't do that after they filed. We agreed on that before they filed. Now, Neil, did any of the candidates get 60% of the vote? No, they didn't. Is that democracy? Yeah, it is. It is democracy because we agreed on it before they came. And if the candidates are not strong enough to achieve it, that's democracy, isn't it?
Okay, but let's talk about this. So, the delegates were up there. They know what's at stake. I feel like the party should not have left until they came out with one candidate that they all could vote for and send that back down to the state, up and down the state, to let the Democrat voters know who their candidate was.
Well, let
me just say this. That's why we vote for our delegates. That's why, to send them up there to represent our different communities on our behalf. So if I'm voting for you to send you up to Northern California to come back with the candidate that you all agree, because we're looking at this from a party perspective, and you come back with nothing.
Well, here's the challenge to all the variables in our democracy. The moderates, the blue dogs, the progressives, all of the variables that make up our democracy. We agreed, ladies and gentlemen, on what the rules were, and we have been following those rules, 60% to get the endorsement. What is wrong with, as you all say, particularly those of us in the progressive area, what about rolling up our sleeves and taking it to the streets? Meaning that there's more work to do. What about trusting the fact that people voted how they felt? They didn't feel that there was one person with whom they were going to jump on the truck for. What about accepting that reality that that's where they are? Now, if you want to change it as you've said you do, then roll up your sleeves. Let's take it to the streets. Now, let's convince those of us who are having to go to the polls. What about the progressives getting together and getting enough people to the polls to make sure Mega doesn't win? Oh, no, we don't want to do that. We want to do something else. Let's roll up our sleeves, ladies and gentlemen. Let's take it to the streets. And if your candidate is all of that, then first of all, your candidate would have got 60%. They didn't. And now that we don't have 60%, ladies and gentlemen, those of us who are progressives, guess what? We got to do some more work. We're not going to kill the system.
Okay, so we're going to agree to disagree on this one, but just know, folks, that there are two MAGA candidates that are running that could take the top 2 seats, and that's what polling is saying, and that's why we should all be paying attention to California, because it might flip red.
Let me add to that.
Okay.
We have to do what we just did with USC. I'm so pleased that they made that decision, but I won't forget it. And so let's not. And so when we talk about USC, we talked about them right behind talking about the inability of a government to run the airports. That was all in the same sentence. Ladies and gentlemen, let's cut it out. Let's get back to the basics. And that is rolling up our sleeves, doing the work, treating each other with respect, understanding what the rules were that we agreed upon, and doing the necessary work for the results we have to achieve. And it doesn't mean just the conservatives. It means the liberals too.
Mm-hmm. And folks, just so you know, there is one African-American candidate that is running. His name is Tony Thurman.
Absolutely.
And so we will be tracking him and trying to get him on the show as well to hear from him and talk about his platform and why he's running. Let's head to the Department of Education, who just took a big step closer to shutting down. Now, the Trump administration has announced an agreement between the Department of Education and the Treasury to move student lending operations to the Treasury, which will also assume operational responsibility from collecting on defaulted federal student loan debt and provide operational support to the Department of Education's efforts to return borrowers to repayment to their loans. Now, the Department of Education also announced 6 new agreements shifting most of K-12 programs, as well as many higher education programs, to the Department of Labor, Health and Human Services, Interior, and the State Department. So our Department of Education now has been dispersed to all of these different agencies within our federal government. Okay. So they're dismantling the Department of Education and they're reallocating all these departmental funds to the Human Health Services and Interior, but they can't do that for the TSA workers. I mean, there is a connection to all of this and showing you how this Trump administration is just doing what they want to do. Why they're dismantling the Department of Education, I have no idea. I would like to know in the chat, what are your thoughts about why are they dismantling the Department of Education? And then, Mike, I want to hear from you.
Well, obviously, education is the key to success. It is right there as a tool to the American dream. And we ought to be in the streets protesting the fact that the Department of Education is not in place. It is the bridge to get people over to, again, achieve the American dream. I am a strong advocate in education, and I want to make sure that American citizens have access to it. I think those who are in the federal government who oversee education need to take it seriously. They need to understand that it is available for everyone. And I am terribly disappointed that, first of all, this so-called Project 25 predicted that these departments in the federal government would be dismantled, and to follow up and to see it absolutely happen is extremely disappointing. And I think that it's inevitable that we shall and will find a way that education will be accessible to American citizens. And just as we did back in the slavery days, because it seems as if that's where we're headed, having to fight every minute for some kind of access to publicly funded services for which our taxpayers have been dedicated. And yet there's a denial of us receiving those services. It puts us back to earlier times of discrimination, and it needs to stop. That's
So
what I.
the chat really has a lot to say about this. James Lining says the teachers union is very strong, so more than likely he's trying to dismantle the teachers union. Mike V says they are dismantling it because it's how states and cities get funding for Black schools. The Stephanie Humphrey channel is saying because they want to dismantle public education altogether in favor of charter schools, private schools, and vouchers. Taylor Wolf says, then why is the Democrats not fighting Trump? And so, Michelle Madison says this makes no sense to get rid of the Department of Education. And I mean, this is what happens when you have, as the secretary of the Department of Education, the CEO of a wrestling, what do you call it, WWF or whatever the wrestling organization is?
Company or corporation.
Yeah, what she's running. And, she's just doing what Project 2025 wants her to do. And we should be highly alarmed at this. And these are the things which goes back to the Democratic Party. Like, why aren't they raising the alarm about this? The Department of Education is being dismantled, and it's been spread out. I mean, to the Treasury Department, the Health and Human Services, Interior, and God forbid Robert F. Kennedy is in charge of anything that has to do with little kids in the Department of Education. All this stuff has been just spread out, and Democrats aren't really putting the pieces together for the American people. Do you find that to be problematic, Mike?
You said the Democrats. What was that last statement? I'm trying to see how it relates to
Democrats. The Democrats are not raising the alarm for their constituents on a national level. This is a national issue. The Department of Education being dismantled. Where is the DNC leadership about?
Neil, our Democrats have been raising hell about the education department. If we've looked at the news over the months, we've had them going and attempting to go to the education department and couldn't get in the door. You remember seeing that on the news? I think Congresswoman Waters was one.
Okay, that was back when they first started.
It doesn't matter when it was. See, now, if you're going to hit us, give us credit for when we have done something. They were there, they have tried to get in, and they couldn't get in. It is not true that the Democrats have not raised the alarm. They have. And she's been the only one that has raised hell about education. As I said, and I listened to the remarks on the chat, they are absolutely correct in the remarks that they gave about what we have experienced in this country more recently over the last few months, about the way in which they have tried to undermine education. As I said, it is a bridge to the American dream for all of us, and we have to fight. And I agree that it is a responsibility for our elected leaders, but for all of us to own the education that is ours, the public education that is ours. It used to be that the federal government led in education. We look at the development of historically Black colleges and universities that came about specifically in terms of the public effort after the institution of slavery ended. We had in the early 1800s the Murrell Act that created and established HBCUs. It's because the federal government, the Murrell Act was a federal government initiative. So we have come to a point in time where the federal government has reversed itself and not been, speaking of progressive, making sure that there was education for African Americans was something that government has done in the past, and they need to continue to do, not only for African Americans, but others within this country as well. We all have to come together. Education is not just a Democratic thing, it's a American thing. And I expect to see uh, Republicans out there leading the way in education as well.
Well, you
This
could
is
wait
why
for
we got
that
on
one.
USC. This is why we got on USC. It's not a Republican thing because you happen to be a Republican at USC, or a Democratic thing because you happen to be a Democrat at USC. It is a Trojan thing for those of us who belong there, and it's an American thing for those of us who are from this country. All of us need to be on the street on education, and I will not accept anything less than that.
Okay, so Stephanie Humphrey says, I can't speak for the Democrats, but my teachers union has been keeping us informed about what is going on in education. She says also, Robert is already over young children as early education falls under DHHS. And so this is just what I'm saying. I feel like, and I get, Congresswoman Maxine Waters went to the Department of Education when Trump first got elected. I do get that as an elected official. My point was that the DNC, I'm not talking about elected officials doing their jobs. That's her job to monitor what's happening on a federal level. I'm talking about the DNC. Articulating.
And
Yes.
what I say to you is,
I'm not finished. I'm not finished. What I'm saying is the DNC needs to do a better job at articulating the issues that the American people, and most importantly, their voters, their constituents that they are trying to push out to the polls, they need to ring the alarm. And I don't think that the Democratic Party is ringing the alarm loud enough. Now, chat, I would love to hear from you. Do you think the Democratic Party is ringing the alarm on the issues that will drive people and voters to the poll? That is my question that I'm asking. Do you think that the Democratic National Convention, the party, is ringing the alarm loud enough to drive people to the polls?
I want to say that everybody has to be in the street on education. Yes, I believe that the Democratic Party is a great party. Yes, I believe that in terms of the African American community, we have a lot of investment in votes and reliability that African Americans have and are in the Democratic Party. But again, education is American. Republicans, where are you on standing up to make sure that we have education and that it is a part of the American dream for all of us? You need to help too, because all of us have benefited from education, not some of us, all of us. It's inexcusable. This is a territory that belongs to all of us, and all of us must be in the street on it. Yeah, Democrats must be on it, but while we're taking the strap out and whipping, let's whip some Republicans too, because what are they doing? What are they doing?
Well, they're lining their voters' pockets, right? The 1%.
Yeah, but
he says that's not the job of the DNC, Niel, but they are supposed to have an agenda. What do they stand for? What is their premise? What are their pillars? What are they concerned about?
Madam Co-host, I'm simply saying, Madam Co-host, there are some policy issues where we have to whip all the children, and this is one of them. They don't get a pass. You are giving the Republicans a pass, as if to say it is just the responsibility of Democrats. There are some Republicans who benefit from education as well. There have been some Republicans and some Republican administrations that have been responsible for initiating education. We look today at the reality of who some of our education leaders are. Some of our Black education leaders in the HBCUs are Republicans, believe it or not. So they don't get a pass, Niel. We're going to whip them right along with the Democrats if that's what we're trying to do, because education just doesn't belong to one party. It belongs to all of us, and we expect
Okay.
accountability. There are
Okay, that's fine.
there's some college presidents that are Republican.
Okay, that's fine. That's
Yeah.
fine. But at the same time, Republicans showed us who they are. They are Project 2025. They showed us what they want to do. So for us to depend on them, and I did
I'm
say
not
this
depending on
yesterday,
them. I'm whooping them right along with the
right? Well,
Democrats.
they should be what, but we know what their premise is. It's Project 2025, and they do have a section in it about the Department of Education. So they're doing what they told us they were going to do. My question is, what is our plan? That is a question that America, especially people of color and Democrats, are asking. Where is our Project 2028? Where is our Project 2026? Where is it at? The Republicans have the Heritage Foundation. The Republicans have decided to be MAGA. They have showed us who they are and what their agenda is. It's very clear. And they are checking it off line item by line item. What is our agenda? That's all I'm asking. Tyler Wolf says all of us fight, but we Black people never get any benefit. And he also says left wing, right wing, same bird.
Okay.
Oh.
All righty now.
You like same bird, same bird. All right, let's jump into you can continue to have this conversation in the chat. And we will continue to read your comments, but let's jump into this story. The Trump administration placed a statue of Christopher Columbus on the White House grounds over the weekend. They also released the following statement saying, as we celebrate our nation's 250th anniversary of independence, the White House is proud to honor Christopher Columbus' legendary life and legacy. And he deserves the statue on the White House grounds. And that came from Davis Ingle, a White House spokesperson, who continued to say, in this White House, Christopher Columbus is a hero. And President Trump will ensure he's honored as such for generations to come. So see that, like, this is my point. They're very open about who they are. And if you recall, that statute came from Baltimore during the 2020 civil unrest because of George Floyd. And it was one of the ones that was toppled. And so they said, no, we're going to put it on the White House grounds and we're going to double down on who Christopher Columbus is. And we won't give a damn about what y'all talking about Indigenous People Day. We doubling down on Christopher Columbus for 250 years.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, did Christopher Columbus discover the New World? Did he ever set foot on American soil? Tell us who historically Christopher Columbus is.
Oh, well, they're telling you. They're telling you who in their perspective, who he is. They're telling you who they think he is. They'll tell you he did discover America. He did. You know, they'll double down on it.
Well, that is certainly the subject of debate, and we need to do more debate of it. And we need to do a further examination of the contribution Christopher Columbus did offer, and we need to delineate what it was that he did not offer.
Well, Orange G is giving us some historical facts. He's saying that Columbus never discovered the USA. What about the Negro brothers, who were the captains of the other two ships?
Teach.
All right, let's go to New York, where one of New York's Underground Railroad museums, the Underground Railroad Education Center, has sued the Trump administration over a federal grant it says was axed because of race. Now, the educational center located in Albany filed the lawsuit hoping to overturn the grant's repeal. The complaint alleges that Trump's anti-DEI push led to the dissolution of the grant supporting its operations. Now, the National Endowment for Humanities bestowed a $250,000 allotment before its sudden cancellation last year. So we can't get no Underground Railroad, but they gonna pay to bring Christopher Columbus to the White House. this is what we're dealing with right now.
hmm 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 Well, we definitely have a lot of work to do. And did you say there was a lawsuit involved here?
Oh, well, yeah, they're filing a lawsuit because they want their grant. You know, they
hmm
probably had already allocated that 250,000, how they were going to use it, and then it gets pulled because of DEI.
Well, what we have noticed in our history in this country as African Americans is that the court system has been the system to which we have been involved and taken our complaints and have been victorious. When we look at some of the struggles we have had, even let's look at education,
Hmm.
so critically important. In this country, as African Americans, we started out testing the transportation system. Plessy versus Ferguson. We tried to get on the train. Your homeboy, homie Plessy, tried to get into a first class area, and they told him just be happy to be anywhere on the train. We were not able to break the transportation system first, but in 1954, some 49 or more years later, we were able to break the education system and Brown versus the Board of Education. So we have to continue to use the court system, in summary, as the ground by which we can fight for justice and equality and equity. And so for this group to go to the court system, I think that is a great choice for them to help to make this injustice just. And hopefully in the court arena, we can have more ethical discussions about the truth that oftentimes we're not able to achieve in a political environment, because sometimes we tend to just want to go left or right in the political environment. But in the courtroom, it's an environment. Take this note, USC, that the court tries to set an environment of fairness and justice, and they don't try to take sides in that way. So it's an arena that I feel is more promising for this group who has the complaint about having been denied a grant that had already been allocated to them.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about reparations. This is a subject that you know a lot about as well, Mike. The
Mhm.
Evanston, Illinois Reparations Committee officially opened its interest forms for its new Black Business Grant Program. Now, the grant program is designed to provide direct financial assistance to businesses that have historically faced barriers to capital and commercial growth due to systemic racism or divestment. Now, this latest phase of the city's $10 million restorative plan shifts focus from housing to economic development, specifically targeting the racial wealth gap by supporting local Black owned businesses. Now, this is their form of reparations. Is this the evolution of what 40 acres and a mule looks like today?
In
Is this
terms of the moving of the money from housing to economic development,
Yeah, or how just this Evanston, Illinois is defining what they think reparations is.
well, each level of government does have the authority based upon the areas of responsibility they have to come up with solutions that they uniquely can deliver on. Most levels of government have certain tasks for which they have responsibility. And so, if there is an agreement
Mhm.
among the groups that are doing it, I think that that's a wonderful thing. The fact that they even want to entertain repairing a group that has been disenfranchised, I think is a great thing. It's an American thing. And
Mhm.
why is it an American thing? Because America has repaired many other groups in our society before. We repaired the Japanese Americans after the World War, where in fact they were interred. We repaired some of our Native brothers and sisters, Native American brothers and sisters. We repaired some of our Jewish American brothers and sisters. And so, why is it that there is a question about repairing a group of people who, for over 400 years, provided free labor to this country? Why is that a question? Why is it that there are elected officials, Blacks included, who cannot see this as an issue that, in it of itself, should be addressed because it's been addressed before with other groups. And so, how do I feel about Evanston, Illinois? I feel good about the fact that they have taken the guts to come together, get an agreement, and to make an effort for reparations.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the 40 acres and a mule concept has expanded. I mean, it has to evolve, just like our societies and our community evolves. But I think that Tyler Wolf has a good, well, he has a point that I think that is being debated as we talk about what reparations looks like. And they're saying reparations should be for descendants of slaves only, not all Black people. And this is the conversation where, they always bring up like a Kamala Harris and a Barack Obama, whose parents are not necessarily born in the United States. And so they're not directly descendants of slavery. And others say, no, if you're Black, you get reparations. I mean, do you think that that is a sticking point? What are your thoughts about that debate?
Well, I think that the state of California is one of the few states in the country that had an examination of the variables that one might want to consider in discussing reparations. We looked at what, in fact, it is the requirement for reparations. And in California, those who are American descendants of slaves specifically are the beneficiaries of the reparations that we in California are going to execute. And why is that fair? If I get in a car accident, State Farm is going to give a check to me, not to my sister, not to my aunt, but to me because I'm the one that got my car hit. The same way here, there are various governments that were involved in slavery. England was involved. Some of the folk who might be from Jamaica who were a part of that would have been enslaved by those from another country. So as we think about
money, there's big money. You see big
money.
money.
I know big money. I know big money. So as we think about what is accountability in the implementation of reparations, the state of California said American descendants of slaves. And it is not in violation of California's Proposition 209, which people were trying to threaten to say, because 209 says you cannot do a government program based upon race and or gender, that if you were to say all Black people, that is a philosophy of what? Of race. And that would be what? Illegal in California, because Proposition 209 is the rule of the day in the state, not Mississippi. I didn't say Mississippi, I said California. So since Proposition 209 is the rule of the day, to have the idea and to propose the answer that all Blacks will get it would be illegal in California. So thus, the answer is American descendants of slaves, because that is not a racial inference. That is one that is factual and historical. For all of those who were injured, if we put it down to a concept of insurance, where those who were injured here in America, the American descendants of slaves.
Well, Orange is saying, I will say it. You have Jewish people who had nothing to do with the Holocaust, but damn near every so-called Jewish person receives reparations to this day in the U.S. and in Israel.
And I would say to him, California has Proposition 209.
What is Proposition 209, real quick? Just
for those. It's a state law that prohibits any state program from making a decision for benefits based upon race and color and gender. And further, it limits public contracting, it limits public jobs, and it limits higher education, public education. So these are the three areas of government service that cannot make a decision, meaning our colleges and our universities, meaning our government jobs, meaning our public contracts, can't make a decision based upon race and or gender. So then the reparations program would have been a service of the state. And therefore, you could not give all blacks, because that would have been making a decision based upon what? Upon race. That's what would have made that illegal. So, yes. And that's not Mississippi, ladies and gentlemen. That's California.
All right, so let's move on. Just a couple more headlines. This news broke out. Some of you probably already heard. A civil jury in California found that Bill Cosby was liable for drugging and sexually assaulting a woman in 1972 and awarded her $59.25 million. Now, after nearly a 2-week trial in Santa Monica, jurors found Cosby, who's now 88, liable for the sexual battery and assault of Donna Motzingsinger. They awarded her $17.5 million in past damages and $1.75 million for future damages, including mental suffering, loss of enjoyment of life, inconvenience, grief, anxiety, humiliation, and emotional distress. Then, in a second phase of the trial on Monday afternoon, they awarded an additional $40 million in punitive damages. So there she is, y'all. And so we see this reckoning with men from the 70s and the 60s. You know, Cesar Chavez, news broke last week about him and Dolores Huerta. And so, I mean, you know, thoughts? No thoughts?
Well, I don't know what thought there could be. These trials go to court, and they, again, are in an environment where they are looking at what the facts are and decisions are made. And the question at the end of every trial is, was the decision fair? And were they able to get all the facts out on the table?
Well, here's the question too. You know, in cases like this, is it important to have a statute of limitation? You know, this happened in 1972. Should there be a threshold or statute of limitation? Or if you do something, you know, it doesn't matter if it happened in 1919. If you offended me, I can sue you. Do you think that statute of limitations are important in situations like this, or no, they're not?
Yeah, the whole issue of statute of limitations in and of itself is a proposition that people really are concerned with. And certainly in serious cases, people would not want there to be statute of limitations. We have cases in history, particularly for those of us from our culture of African American experience, where in fact murders and those kind of things have occurred, and there is no statute of limitation on murder. And in issues of sexual abuse, there really has not been any limitation on it as well, to my understanding. And I think that people who are abused would personally feel that they wanted justice as soon as they possibly could get it. Unfortunately, in our system, we have not been able to get expeditious justice, even though the court system prefers it. But again, I conclude that people who have been a victim would like to have justice, and certainly sooner than later.
Taylor Wolf says, so she gets reparations, but for us, it was too long ago.
Now, hello. And that goes not only for those who we know, but that goes for those who are a part of understanding our experience and who would jump out front and say we shouldn't deserve it. Like you said, what about such and so and such and so? And sometimes such and so and such and so don't fit the criteria. But the first person to jump out comes from our camp, you know what I'm saying, if you will.
Right. Well, for those of you who can separate the art from the man, we have TV1 owned by Kathy Hughes and her son Alfred Liggins. They show the Cosby Show every day. And so I think that that is a show that is important to our culture. And that show is bigger than Bill Cosby. And so support the Cosby Show.
Mhm,
And you, Mama Claire Huxtable, you know, the estate of Malcolm Jamal Warner,
mhm.
and you know, all of them. It's such a great show. I watch it at least 3 times a week to this day.
Yes, yes, yes.
And last but not least, the story that we talked about yesterday. Yesterday we kicked off the show, Mike, with our poll talking about Tina Turner's estate
Yes.
being sold to a Swedish firm. And the conversation also took a turn about, can a Swedish firm really preserve her Black culture and the significance of Tina Turner in the 80s? And so we talked about that. And then I saw this story about Janet Jackson that I think is relative to it. And it's on the flip side of how she is building her legacy. And of course, she does have a son. Janet Jackson is making waves in the business world by signing a massive long-term global publishing deal for her Believe Music Publishing. Now, the significance, this brings her entire legendary catalog from the world-changing Rhythm Nation, Control, to her most recent hits, Under One Roof. And the move signals a major push to further monetize and preserve her musical legacy through digital innovation and global synchronization. And that's through film, TV, and ads. So this is a huge deal for Janet Jackson. When you look at how her brother's estate, Michael, you know, is being controlled, and then the family gets, you know, their allocation, and how she's taking control, for lack of better terms, I love that album, Control, of her legacy, and building legacy for her son. So what do you think about all this?
Well, we have celebrities who have an international base and they have economic options in terms of where they want to uh, found or establish a foundation for their legacy. And they have every right to do so. Janet Jackson, Tina Turner, and there are others who might be based with economic interest in America, but who could very well establish their economic foundation in other parts of the world. I think that realizing who some of our dynamic celebrities are, that we should promote and support whatever economic choice they make to sustain their legacy. I promote and I enjoy whatever decision they make because African presence and achievement is worldwide. It's not limited to the United States. And I promote, I accept, and I enjoy that reality.
All right. So, you know, today we can listen to the soundtrack of Control. Our producer Greer is saying, I wonder if she had guidance from the minister. So, like, she's talking about the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's son, because word on the street is they're dating, and we've seen them. She was at Savior's Day. And then they've been seen at the New Edition concert and several other concerts. So, um, you know, that's what Greer's question. She wonders if there's guidance from the minister. So let's jump into our Black facts before we get out of here. Very good conversation today, Mike.
Thank you.
But let's go to 1985. Today's Black fact. Remember The Last Dragon? Remember that movie?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, so on this day, The Last Dragon was released, popularizing martial arts within the Black urban culture. So drop a thumbs up, y'all, if you guys remember The Last Dragon. And if you, oh, Stephanie Humphrey says, show enough. So yeah, if you saw the Last Dragon and you liked it, you know, give it some love in the chat. And moving forward to 2000, Romeo Must Die hit theaters. Remember that one, Mike?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that one was featuring R&B star, our beloved Aaliyah. It was her film debut. and DMX was in that movie. And then is that, I can't remember. Oh, Jet Li. Jet Li was in that film. That was a fun one too. I could see them remaking that one. So yeah, in 2000, Romeo Must Die dropped. So those are some classics that you guys might want to go check out. But my great conversation today, from California to Illinois to New York, we talked about it all. And so thanks for joining us this morning. We love you on a Tuesday.
Roy, thank you very much. And I enjoyed looking at accountability and making sure that everybody is accountable. The Republicans, the Democrats, and all of those who might approach government are going to be held to the same standard. We're going to whoop all of them.
We're gonna whoop all of them. Okay, so we hope to have you back next Tuesday. And we want to see about getting Tony Thurman on the show. He is the only Black candidate running for governor in the state of California. And
yes, he's the only state elected officer currently. He is the Secretary of Public Instruction, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, responsible for the public schools in the entire state of California currently, as he also is a candidate for governor.
Oh, so we'd love to hear what he thinks about what the Department of Education is doing
absolutely.
from a federal level. But thank you so much. We'll be back tomorrow. Joining us tomorrow will be the editor of the Houston Forward Times. And so stay tuned, stick around. We have more news, views, and opinions. And of course, we're always on the advocacy front because that's what the Black Press does. So for the latest in Black news, head on over to blackpressusa.com and support your local Black newspaper. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace out.
Thank you. Thank you.